Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And welcome to another episode of Dawah Ilallah as we learn the sciences of comparative religion, or comparative sciences I should say. And in this series we've been looking at many different ways to talk to Christians perhaps about their doctrinal beliefs. We looked at the last episode, we looked at a few reasons that we can say that the crucifixion itself, the actual point where they got to the crucifixion, did not take place. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of reasons. I'm not exaggerating. And if you want to see those hundreds of reasons, instead of me going through them all over again, this was just a teaser where you can go watch it on Peace TV, which is the comparative show that we did called The Cross Questioned. If you've missed it, you haven't seen it, then you can contact Peace TV and I'm sure they will tell you how to get the entire series. Today we are going to break from analyzing Christianity or any other belief system in the world. And again, like we've done a few times already in this series, it's time for introspection again. It's time for us to look at ourselves. We looked at a few episodes back. We looked at some of the qualities that are required for a da'i, and we said these things need to be restored or repaired in ourselves before moving forward as da'is. Today we're going to look at something else that you'll find very, very challenging when doing dawah. It is something that we find very challenging even in ourselves when we try to learn anything about Islam, any new concept. In this series, we spoke about what happens when this body dies. What type of body do we get? Is it going to be a spirit body? Remember we looked at that verse that the Christians say, unless you are born again, man cannot enter the kingdom of God, because flesh cannot enter heaven, only a spirit can. And so we looked at what that meant. And I said, we agree on that, but we don't agree on it in the sense that we're going to be some ghost floating around. But different people will look at that in a different way. We will have a body. We know that. We know it's clear in Islam that we'll have a body. What it'll be like, this only Allah knows. We know some information, like it will be much bigger than this. Much, much bigger. This is just a small little version of how great and amazing this body that we're going to get is going to be. It's not going to get sores, it's not going to get cuts, it's not going to get bruises. It's going to be an amazing body. We'll all have an age that we'll get to. So we won't be getting older and we won't be 90 years old and 12-year-olds, we'll all have the same age. So this is very important that I explain that before we go on today. When we look at any topic regarding the body, or the soul, or the hereafter, or the here now, a lot of how we see things depends on our culture. Our culture sometimes is projected in front of what we are hearing. So when you're talking to someone, they're hearing culture. They're not hearing words. So perhaps if you're coming from Asia and you're talking to someone from Africa, there is a cultural gap. Not an age gap, but a cultural gap. Because when you're speaking perhaps from Malaysia to somebody who lives in America, they don't have the same cultural understanding of terms you're using that you do. You're using them and thinking, because you're looking at it from your own cultural perspective, they understand what you're talking about. This happens so many times in dawah. I cannot tell you how often. Often, I watch some of the Islamic channels around the world and I cringe because I go, oh no, no, no. You've just lost half the world with what you just said, because you are using it from your own cultural perspective. You have to understand that not everybody sees things the way you see it. In fact, we don't sometimes see things the way we think we're seeing them, because our cultural bias changes the way we absorb or pass on information. This is a very, very important part of dawah. You see, dawah is not just going out and talking. There are certain times, like we've done in this series, where we have to stop and look at certain points that are going to make you more effective for yourself being a better Muslim, as well as the work of dawah that you intend to do, inshallah, for the sake of Allah. The dawah that we are doing is not broad spectrum dawah, it's specific dawah, calling people to submit to Allah. Yes, there are many other aspects to dawah, but in this focus of our series, we're only interested in one part of the Dawah, of the many facets there are to Dawah. So we're interested in Dawah Ilallah. So if I had to ask you today, what are the aspects that make up a human being? What are you? What would your answer be? If I had to say, explain who you are. Maybe you're seeing a Hindu or a Christian or a Muslim or a Buddhist, doesn't matter what religion they are from. You would say, I am a body and a, what else are you? Anybody have any ideas? You have an idea. So we're made up of a body. Obviously we are chemical. We are body. We are material. The obvious thing we can see, it's a body. What else are we made of?
Soul.
Body and soul. And so in this life that we're living now, the body is the most important thing. Am I right? Soul is important, but if we get pain on this life, we get shot, somebody shoots us, the soul is not really affected. It's the body. In the life hereafter, in the form that we will take, the soul is more important than the body. And then there is another third step that takes place, which we'll leave it to the theologians to deal with. So in this life, the soul is smallest in getting injured, even though we can injure it by the choices we make. But physically, this is the most important, that we are physical beings here. And we have a soul. And we have something else as well. What do we have? Anybody else have an idea? We have a body and a soul. What else is there? We have something called a culture. People never think of adding that in when they talk about a soul or a body. They'll say we have a body, mind, and a soul. Don't you ever heard that before? Body, mind, and soul, you're more or less saying the same thing when you're talking about mind. It belongs to both the body and the soul. It makes decisions for the body, it makes decisions for the soul. But there is a third element that makes up who we are in our existence. And this may sound a bit new agey, a bit weird. But it's important that we understand it and we don't turn it into something more than I'm actually speaking about in the series. We're not going all mystical here. We're not going all, okay, let's talk about the spirit and get all mystical. We're not. We're being very down to earth. So be careful that when you watch this and you listen to it and you follow it, that you don't overanalyze what is being said. It's a simple concept. We are made up of three separate parts, differing from what region we are from. We all have in common a body and a soul, spirit, whatever you want to call it. But our culture has sometimes a greater role to play than many of the other things that we come across in life. So a body and mind together with your culture makes up who you are. And culture is more powerful, I believe, than your genes or your DNA. Scientists are going, what is this guy talking about? Doctors are going, I can't wait to send this email off to this man. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Your culture is more powerful than your genes or your DNA because our culture dictates how we are going to adhere to what our genes and our DNA says. And we'll see a little bit more of this later, inshallah, as we'll go into detail what I mean by this. But for now, accept what I'm saying. We'll give you the proof that your DNA and your genetic makeup are not as important as your culture. Many people say, don't let your culture come into the equation. It's almost impossible. So if we can't stop it, let's understand it. And let's put it under control. Then let it override our dawah, override our Islamic living, our Islamic way of life. So your culture is a lot more important to you than your genes are. Very, very few of you ever introduced yourself and said, my name is Areeb and my genes are. Or my name is Areeb and my DNA strand says. I will introduce myself and say, my name is Areeb Islam. I am from South Africa. That's how I'll identify myself. People will be very proud. I see when you go driving through America, I love America. When you drive through India, people say, I love India. They're very patriotic. Maybe not as much as the Americans with flags on every corner. But we are patriotic. As soon as the cricket is on, you'll see how patriotic people are. How much they love their country. How much they identify with the culture. So culture is more important to us than our genes or our DNA. I don't know anybody who went and paid $2,000 or however it was to go get their DNA and genes tested and to find out what tribe they actually come from. You know those kits that you can do online? People pay big money. They send you a little kit and you swab your lip, your inside of your cheek, and you send it to the DNA database, and then they come back and they say, well, your great-great-grandfather used to be an Aborigine, and your great-great-great-great-great-grandmother was from Palestine, and she used to collect wood, and this is what we all found through your DNA. I don't know many people who have done that. I know people have done it, but literally I know one person in the whole planet that went and did it. According to the databases where they have this, a lot of people have done it, but I don't know any of those people. People are more interested in, I am what I am. That's more or less the culture that they have. So how many people, if we had to ask the question, if I had to ask the people right here, how many people are ethical? Probably wouldn't have anybody raising their hand. If I had to ask, how many people here are brilliant? Even at home, if I had to say, are you ethical or are you brilliant? Would you raise your hand? Let's take a break. When we get back from the break, I'll continue with this point, inshallah.
Islam covers all aspects of this life and the hereafter.
We begin with the letter A. A is for what? A is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator of the heavens and the earth.
The do's and don'ts, the freedom to choose, to decide our way of life.
My prayer, my fasting, my zakah, my hajj, my slaughter.
As per our wise creator's will or our uncertain human will.
Everything is only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Ullal, Ismail.
Purification, a super important matter in our Sharia, as we will learn A to Z of purification.
Appreciate the holistic approach of Islam in dealing with various affairs of life in A to Z series. Every Monday at 8 p.m. and repeat telecast at 8:30 a.m. India on Peace TV.
Where truth is hidden, misleading quotations create confusion. Where truth is hidden, lack of knowledge and wisdom cause upheaval and commotion. Where truth is hidden, manipulated scriptures and twisted facts emerge. This very hidden truth creates false propaganda, mayhem, chaos, disorder, and turmoil in our lives and the world order. But is there anyone with courage and wisdom? What is the truth, and who has the courage to expose it? Because it's your right to know the truth.
Watch Truth Prevail and Lies Perish in Truth Exposed by Dr. Zakir Naik every Sunday to Friday at 9 p.m. and repeat telecast at 7:30 a.m. India on Peace TV. Peace TV presents over 100 million viewers at one of the largest peace conferences in the world, addressing a sea of spellbound spectators. Over 30 world-renowned orators on Islam with credentials impeccable.
The truth of Islam. Deen is your way of life.
It is our duty, our obligation.
By following the Quran and Sunnah,
we will give the message to one and all.
With articulation exquisite.
read the book of Allah.
Islam is the easy way. It's the simple way.
Remind each other.
The Muslim is not a source of harm for other people.
Collaborate with the people for good.
This is the call of Islam.
With the mission of spreading the truth of Islam.
Do what you can to spread the word of Islam.
Wherever we are,
Live like Muslim.
Use your power.
Allah is saying, why do you need anything else? This Quran is self-sufficient.
only book on the face of the globe, the Quran.
How a human being should lead his life is given in this instruction manual, the glorious Quran.
For peace to prevail on earth in Peacemakers. Next on Peace TV.
Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And we are continuing with looking at how culture plays a role in the work that we are doing as da'is, and if we do not have it under control, it can run out off the rails and land up ruining what we are trying to do. As well, it can ruin us. As well, it can also ruin our own deen. So, I said before the break, how many people, if I had to ask you at home, would raise your hands and say, are you ethical? Very few people would raise their hands. If I had to say, are you brilliant? How many people would raise their hands? If I had to say, are you beautiful? How many people would raise their hands? You see, our culture tells us that we are not allowed to accept this type of praise. We may be out of false modesty, maybe out of real modesty, but it changes from culture to culture. Perhaps if you ask the same questions to the Russians or the Germans, they'd be, yes, 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 no problem. If you had to ask the people in India that, even if it was true, they would go, can't raise my hand. It's not acceptable. It's rude. It's not the way to be. So much of our lives is dictated to by our culture. But one of the interesting things is we can never lie to our bodies. We might have a cultural perspective, but we can never lie to our bodies. Our bodies always know best. And this is why even in Islam, we believe that our body parts will talk, body talk, on the day of judgment. Because our lips will say one thing, our body will say another. Our hands will speak what they did. Our fingers will speak. So these things are important to understand. So let's look at emotions first of all. If all cultures are the same, let's start from an emotional perspective. What are emotions? Most of us assume that emotions are the same for everybody in the world, but they're not. Everybody's emotions are different. Understanding of what emotions are different. So if we look at Western or Eastern emotions, they're very different to one another. Those from the East and those from the West have very different understandings. If you look at the Portuguese and the Greek, for example, Portuguese, Greeks, to a certain extent the Italians, that's part of the world. You see that when they talk, it sounds like they're fighting with each other. They're very loud and very aggressive and very emotional and very expressive in the way they talk. But when you come to other countries, it's very hands held together, you know, reserved, very quiet. Very different way of expressing emotions and feelings. In many languages in the world, because the language itself is limited, it's required for you to do facial expressions and movements and body motions. Like you'll find in the Zulu culture, even the people are standing right next to each other in Africa, they'll be speaking very loud and very emotive. They're using lots of actions and shapes and forms. You'll find in the old, what they call the Bakwela and Vasquela, which we all know as Bushmen, they made all sorts of clicking sounds. But most of the time they were using shapes and forms of animals and giving descriptions because that was what required in their culture to communicate what they were actually saying. So psychology has been around for how long? Islam has been around for 1,400 plus years, and actually from the beginning of time, to be honest. It's not only 1,400 years. And I trust Islam more than I trust psychology. It's been around longer. It stood the test of time. What psychologists said, this is the way to analyze an issue, has changed so many times. In the beginning, they used to electrocute people, duck them under the water, force them into cages, put them in solitary confinement. Today, they supposedly moved forward. Now, instead of doing that, they just give you drugs. More or less do the same thing. So, if we have a look, Muslims have been more interested in medicine, the state of your mind, the state of your being, sciences, and how they influence the length of your life more than any other religion in the world or any other science in the world. Islam is about extending your life, how to live a better life. They have the cure for aging. Today I was at the Islamic Research Foundation, and there was one of the brothers who was 80 years old. He looks like he's 40. You walk in there like, what? We have the secret to life. Submit, hand your life over to Allah, perform your salah on time, fast during the month of Ramadan, and you'll see how well balanced, how rounded you become. So Plato was the first Western scholar to talk about emotions, what emotions are and what they do. And he believed that emotions are a mental process, that it's something that happens, everything that happens is mental. This is Plato's understanding of emotion. William James, who is from Harvard University, he said that emotions are actually a physiological response to what is going on around you. So one says it's purely emotional, other one says it's a response to what's going on around you. People will get angry because they see something happen and then they have an emotional response. They feel sad and then they have an emotional because of what they see around them. Aristotle claimed that emotions are an interconnection with your thoughts and your actions. So there are three different definitions by the sciences, by the brains of the day, or the brains of our times that we look at. Now, Eastern beliefs often understand emotions and say that emotions are something that you have to experience. You have to get into, connect with your emotions and experiences. In a way, many times looked at as inseparable from the body and the mind. They are stuck together. Many Eastern philosophies. That's why you'll see that when these holy men, supposedly, will go and they will starve their bodies to get to a higher state of consciousness. Instead of starving their spirit, they starve their body. In the newspaper just the other day, in fact, on Sunday, in the newspaper, in the Indian Times, there was a big picture, and I wish I could show everybody at home. And it said, when I go, every time I plunge into the waters of the Ganges, I feel that I am becoming more spiritually connected. Every time I plunge more into the water, I feel myself becoming more spiritually connected. And when I saw that, I had to take a photograph of that to put on the internet, because it's sometimes exactly how people from the East may see something. They think somehow if you deprive your body, that you're somehow going to become spiritually connected. You're going to have emotional maturity. That's how it is seen in Eastern cultures. So what is emotion, if we had to look at it? What is emotion? Well, emotion is different to different people, and the experience of feeling is what we often call emotion. So when a person prays to God, when he prays to Allah, there are two types of ways that he can do this. The first way, it is a calm and meditative prayer. That is like reciting. When you're reciting something. Many religions in the world, like the Catholics, Hindus, Krishna consciousness movement, they do recitation. So it's a calming and meditative prayer, a recitation. And then you have interactive and repentant, which is the second type of prayer. I want to change and I want to learn from Allah. I want to learn from God. These are the two ways. So we have to understand, even the understanding from our emotional perspective of prayer may differ. So we have to find out how they are seeing it from their cultural perspective. So what is the right way? It's both. But some cultures from east to west will separate and have it very different. One will just be repetitive, and I don't even know why I'm doing it. It just becomes a mantra with no thought behind it. And then you have another culture which is, it becomes very interactive and very repentant, and it's almost hard without any emotions involved in it. It just becomes painful sometimes. It's a combination of both. There has to be an element of doing it because it's good for your body, and it is sometimes you're disconnecting, because this is why when we finish our salah, we come back to earth and we say assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. We are greeting people because we've gone. There should be that experience. It shouldn't just be the sciences of salah. It should also be emotion combined, but it mustn't be to the exclusion of either. So beware when you're talking to people, just because they are praying 5 times a day doesn't mean they're understanding it. From their cultural perspective, you have to understand how they are seeing it. So it's very, very important, even here at home, that you don't just do things without thinking why you're doing them. So don't exclude this spiritual aspect and only do the physical aspect. Both of them need to come together when we talk about something simple as how to pray. So as a da'i, you need to understand these things, that there are aspects of culture that will influence people's understanding of what you're going to be teaching them or showing them. Something very simple as prayer. So today we live in a world of demanding something. They're looking for something. There's spiritual hunger in the world. Make sure you join us again as we continue with the series, and we'll look more at how culture influences our lives. So from us here and from me, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.